security issues at NASA.
Aixa Diaz joins us now in studio. Aixa, Senator Nelson is headed straight to the top to get the
That's right. Senator Nelson will question NASA Administrator Charles Bolden this morning about the computers and mobile devices that were stolen or hacked. The space agency has reported more than 5,000 incidents over the past 2 years. In March of last year, a laptop was stolen containing codes used to command and control the International Space Station.
NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory has sent rovers to Mars and probes to Jupiter, but apparently one thing that eludes them is solid cyberspace.
This is what Anonymous found in their NASA hack. The National Aeronautics and Space Administration, also known as NASA, oversees America's spaceflight capabilities. And when you hear about an astronaut in the U.S. going into space, NASA are the ones who put them there. Much of NASA's information is classified, which means that only people with the necessary clearance have the ability to see everything that NASA finds out in space. Well, recently, a very famous hacking organization called Anonymous hacked into NASA's computer system. And after hacking the system, the group leaked photos that are considered classified. And this is what Anonymous found in their NASA hack. Some of the photos confirm the theories that extraterrestrial life and aliens really do exist. There is a reason why the organization keeps these photos closely guarded from the general public.
On January 4th, 1970, NASA canceled the Apollo 20 moon mission. This came just 6 months after Apollo 11 astronauts Buzz Aldrin and Neil Armstrong became the first people to ever set foot on the moon. Instead of launching another crew of astronauts to the moon, NASA decided to use the Saturn V rocket that was built for Apollo 20 to launch the Skylab space station instead. Budget cuts, along with the nearly fatal disaster that happened with Apollo 13, led NASA to eventually cut 2 more Apollo missions. Canceling these missions also freed up resources for the space shuttle program. That's what happened.
NASA probably figured that that particular area was what that alien was primarily concerned with and what that particular group of aliens owned or had control of.
Of the moon.
That's correct. And one reason NASA may have kept it secret is so that particular group of aliens couldn't pick up our communications and realize that we were launching additional rockets to the moon.
Which the NASA administration, in collaboration with the CIA and other intelligence agencies, decided that after the Apollo 17 warning, do not come back to the moon, the United States launched Apollo 18, 19, and 20 as secret missions?
They did, yes. 18, I was a command module pilot. I didn't go to the moon. The astronauts, something happened to them. They went crazy. They got sick.
When you say that the astronauts on Apollo 18 went crazy, what happened?
I don't know. NASA just told me they went totally crazy. And they don't appear normal at all. In fact, I think they said they weren't even speaking English anymore. They were speaking a foreign language.
They had landed on the moon?
That's correct.
And so this could have been frequencies that were being focused at the Apollo 18 astronauts by the Greys.
Yeah, that's possible. It could be frequencies. NASA thought that they picked up an infection of some type, but your supposition that they may have been frequencies could easily be the case. May not have been Greys. I have a feeling there's a lot of different aliens on the moon than just the Greys.
So they have territorialized the moon, perhaps the reptiles, the Nordics, and the gray.
That's what I tend to believe.
The video is definitely not going to be for everyone. Do I believe that each and every one of you have reptilian DNA? 100%. But is everyone ready to unlock that DNA? Is everyone ready to dismantle it? Is everyone ready to shut down that reptilian DNA within them? No. And if you react to this video, then most likely it means that you have some work to do. It means that you have to go a little bit deeper. Yes, this video may trigger you.
Apollo 20, William Rutledge, he was the commander.
And you stayed with him to go down in the lander to the surface of the moon to explore the huge spacecraft.
That's correct.
So 20. Why did they decide to do a 20th mission, since 17 was a warning of the gray to you telepathically? 18, the astronauts went mad and died on the moon. Then 19, there was no return. It was a failure. How did they decide to do a 20th mission?
Well, you have to remember that most of the people involved were prior military men, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Same thing's true in war. Sometimes your squadrons don't come back. It doesn't mean you stop. You keep on going. William Rutledge, he was the commander, person in charge. I was the lunar module pilot, so I was actually the one with the control stick that took the lunar lander down.
What happened?
Well, we had a safe landing near the big spaceship that was down there.
What shape?
Cigar-shaped. It was a very large cigar-shaped spaceship. It was discovered on Apollo 15 pictures. That's what we were aiming for. To the best of my knowledge, they never explained it. We simply were going there, and that was it. It was a military mission.
What are you seeing in terms of the detail of this cigar?
Well, it's huge.
How big?
We're talking about something several miles long.
In fact, they have found reference about a 4.8-kilometer cigar-shaped craft investigated on the moon, and 4.8 is almost 3 miles long.
Yes, it was huge. And when we approached the ship, we had a rope ladder, and we were able to throw it up and hook it and go up the side. We were told by NASA to go up into the main groove on the top. It looks like just a small groove from the picture, but in reality, wide. Rutledge had a torch that would cut through almost any metal, and we determined right near the center that that's probably the best way to enter, and we took off one of the hatches and entered. I had warned Rutledge. I said, I've been inside a battleship once. We've got to be careful. We could get lost in there. So Rutledge was actually marking the doors as we moved, which turned out to be extremely important in getting out of there. We had flashlights, very powerful ones. Once we got inside, we had to use them. There was no light. Fortunately, the hatches weren't locked. And once we were inside, we just kept moving toward the front, hoping we would find a cockpit there. And finally, we did.
Were you anticipating that you were going to meet non-humans inside of this big cigar?
We had no idea what would be inside that big cigar craft. We went through hatch after hatch, and we finally opened the hatch and saw the two beings, both dead. Gray, his body had almost totally deteriorated. We saved the head, cut the head off, and Rutledge put it in a container.
And was this gray on Apollo 20 the same type of head and face as you photographed on Apollo 17?
No, looked a little bit more like the grays that are the Zeta Reticuli that we're supposed to have dealt with out west.
What are they supposed to look like?
Large bulbous heads, thin bodies, probably 5, maybe 5.5 feet in length.
Are they friendly or unfriendly from your background working for NASA as a secret astronaut?
Apparently we got into quite a row with them back in 47, which had to do with the use of radar.
We were trying to use microwaves in experiments to see if we could bring down UFOs. That is what I have been told.
That's what I tend to believe also, but I've never seen anything behind the scenes on it.
And those particular Greys then interpreted that assault on them as a reason to shoot down our pilots in planes. Leonard Stringfield told me that from his work in the Air Force, and he ended up writing Situation Red of his great concern, he said, Linda, we lost so many pilots, skirmishers with UFOs, but none of the families were ever told the true reason that the pilots crashed.
That all took place, and those were our World War II leaders, and they were very cold, very tough military men, and they didn't think anything of combat. For them, that was normal, and they threw everything they had at the Zeta Reticulans, and the Zeta Reticulans had a higher level of technology, and from what I've read, nothing that I know from behind the scenes, apparently some of the pilots disappeared out of the cockpits, probably teleported on board the alien ships, and this shook our military up pretty bad because we knew then we were dealing with a much higher level of technology than our own.
Apollo 15 took the photograph of the huge cigar on the moon.
Yeah, so this video may trigger you.
So now we are in that spacecraft. You have found the dead gray in the cockpit with the beautiful Polynesian-looking woman who looks almost preserved. What type of gray was that in the big 3-mile-long Polynesian-looking woman who looks almost preserved? What type of gray was that in the big 3-mile-long cylinder?
The gray did not appear to be the same in the Zeta Reticulans or the gray at Apollo 17. It had a little bit smaller head than the Zeta Reticulans and didn't have the dark gray face shape as the one at Apollo 17. And then the woman was there as well. She was in a jumpsuit, and Rutledge made the decision to bring the woman back because her body didn't seem to have deteriorated very much at all.
Describe her.
Humanoid. She had these things on her face, tubes, grayish tubes. I took the video.
You've got a camera and you take video in there. Are you saying that the video and the photo of the gray that were NASA property and that you took have actually ended up on the web?
Yes, and I'm of the belief, based upon things that were said at the time they showed up, that these things were being beamed back to Earth. And from what I read at the time, in Eastern Europe, they had the ability to pick them up, and they did, and they put them on the web.
On the internet when?
I'm guessing when we got back to the ship, the videos were processed for transmission on the web later, but the pickup was done in 76. My personal guess is the Russians did it. Remember, that was the old Soviet Union back then. A lot of Eastern Europe was part of the Soviet Union.
This video that you took of the gray and the woman would be at what URL?
It's all over the web now. There's a number of them on YouTube, and now there's a bunch of these probably at the instigation of the United States government, but that's just my guess.
But you're telling me right now that, and you are the one who took the video.
That's correct.
Jeez, what do you think of this guy?
Oh, it's for real. I'm telling you, you guys, you're hearing truth, finally. I mean, there have been pieces of this for the last 40 years, and now it's beginning to come together in the whistleblowers. He's not the only whistleblower I am talking to who reinforces this, but this is the first human being that I have met in my life and career who I think when you go into these Earth Files reports and you see all of his DD-214s, you understand that this is a reality, that NASA and the CIA were born together in many ways. The CIA came first in September 18th, 1947. But when NASA was born, we'll call it the window dressing, was to say to the world that NASA was our public, for the public to go into space and all of the fun of Star Wars. But the truth was, behind it always, and I have been told this for at least 30 years, was the Central Intelligence Agency and other intelligence agencies and military operations, because we knew that there was an alien presence. It goes back to that phrase that was used at the time of the JFK assassination.
In these and other ways, let us move up the steep and difficult path towards comprehensive disarmament, securing mutual confidence through mutual verification, and building the institutions of peace as we dismantle the engines of war. We must not let failure to agree on all points delay agreements where agreement is possible, and we must not put forward proposals for propaganda purposes. Finally, in a field where the United States and the Soviet Union have a special capacity in the field of space, there is room for new cooperation, for further joint efforts in the regulation and exploration of space. I include among these possibilities a joint expedition to the moon. By resolution of this assembly, the members of the United Nations have forsworn any claim to territorial rights in outer space or on celestial bodies, and declared that international law and the United Nations Charter will apply. Why, therefore, should man's first flight to the moon be a matter of national competition? Why should the United States and the Soviet Union, in preparing for such expeditions,
Meat has been found in the quarantine zone.
surely we should explore whether the scientists and astronauts of our two countries, indeed of all the world, cannot work together in the conquest of space, sending someday in this decade to the moon not the representatives of a single nation, but the representatives of all of our countries.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Philip J. Corso described his work in the Pentagon about UFOs and ETs and the extraordinary technology in some of the retrieved craft. Quote, there were raised deck panels where there were indentations for the creature's six-fingered hands. This astounding discovery by John Levine and his commander, William Rutledge, in an ancient craft on the backside of the moon in Apollo 20, it had the same six-fingered embedded handprint panels. And now John Levine continues with what he and Commander Rutledge found in the 3-mile-long ancient craft on the back dark side of our moon.
So what is the discussion in detail back in 1976 between you and Commander Rutledge about this extraordinarily beautiful Polynesian-looking preserved female in one of the cockpit chairs?
Neither of us could understand how could she possibly be that well preserved.
And what is it that you're looking at first?
Her skin was all intact, and she was wearing clothing, a dress of some sort, possibly a jumpsuit type of thing, and it seemed to be very much intact, no deterioration at all to speak of.
What about those tubes on her face?
Well, William Rutledge believed that they had to do with controlling the spaceship.
That those tubes on her face were controlling from her mind this huge 3-mile-long craft, and she was the pilot, and the gray was like a co-pilot?
Well, they had a control panel that looks like you put your hands on it, and apparently the controls, the ship's computer interfaced directly with the pilots.
Okay, and we saw that in Roswell, the six-fingered panels. I've talked with both scientists and military people who have confirmed for me they've had their own hands in those panels from 47. There were six fingers on those particular beings. What about this ancient 3-mile-long craft? How many fingers were in the panels there?
6.
There were 6.
5 fingers with opposing thumb.
So that would match what came down in Roswell.
Yes.
Did you and William Rutledge then have discussions about those facts, and did you have information from NASA about look for 6-fingered embedded panels as control of the ship?
I received practically no briefing because I got there just in the nick of time. I'm sure Rutledge made those discussions with NASA. We'd guessed that the ship had been there perhaps millennia and maybe longer.
I was going to ask you if today, have you learned from any analysis that has been done how old this big, huge 3-mile long spacecraft, how long has it been there? How old might it be?
There have been guesses tossed around that it might be a million years old, might have been 100 million years old. I've even heard a billion years old.
And that this female was still in the pilot's chair, preserved?
Absolutely amazing, stunning.
How?
Technology beyond ours. When we took her back to the lunar lander, Rutledge removed her jumpsuit.
Was that because you had transported her into the lander?
That's correct. We didn't do that initially. When we returned, Rutledge said he was going to go get the woman pilot, and he did.
So you had examined them first in the big 3-mile long cigar-shaped ship, and then you went back and got her and brought her to the lander to bring back to the Earth as well as the Gray's Head.
That's correct. Rutledge went back. I remained in the lander. She had what looked like tattoos, but the reality was, or at least what Rutledge believed, when he said it, it made sense to me, that it was some kind of electronics that was placed on her skin.
Oh, you mean that she was a cyborg?
Transhuman to some extent, that's correct.
Organic and technology.
Yeah, it's like there was silver, there was copper colors mixed in with red and blue. It looked sophisticated. So I do tend to believe that she had some kind of a computer attached to her skin, and they were very visible.
Were they all over her body?
No, but the thighs, portions of her sides and back, perhaps as much as 30% of her skin surface.
As much as 30% of her skin surface had these metallic-looking patterns.
Patterns, tattoos, yeah.
See, I've been exposed to self-activating software as being extraterrestrial advanced technology, that patterns that have to do with mathematical language can then create like software so that you don't have to have a computer. You don't have to have a physical computer. You embed all of the programming into the surfaces of what it is you're making.
Right. The tattoos or patterns were probably a computer. It could be that their technology had circuits and chips that were so thin and so small that they would simply look like coloring on the skin.
Now, since you are the only first-hand eyewitness that I or anybody knows who actually has been close to and has seen this extraordinary female cyborg, perhaps, on a craft that could be anywhere from 1 million to 1 billion years old and is on the moon still, but she was brought back to the Earth. What did you see with your own eyes? Patterns, dimensions?
What I saw was an extremely well-preserved person. If they had died on the Earth, you would swear that they hadn't been dead for more than several weeks and kept fairly well-preserved during those several weeks. It was amazing.
Talk about the colors and the pattern shapes and the sizes of the pattern shapes on her body, and exactly where do you remember these patterns were?
Well, they look like circuit patterns. They would form right angles. Several 2-3 lines would go together, and then 2-3 lines would suddenly make a 90-degree turn. It looked computer-like. It really did.
Colors?
Blues and reds primarily.
And where on her body did you
And they
see?
covered, they might have been 8, 9, 10 inches wide and several feet, like 3 feet long.
covering 30% of her body.
I would say, yeah, somewhere in that general ballpark.
It sure sounds like the self-activating software that was described by a scientist to me and to others, having to do with extraterrestrial technology that embeds code in a holographic way in dimensions and also on surfaces. Craft don't need pilots. They can be completely self-activated. And that the surfaces of technology could be placed on our planet, on moons, on planets throughout the universe, and that whatever is the patterns on the surfaces are what keep the technology going.
There was something we ran across before we returned from the ship. And when we went a little bit further beyond the cockpit, we saw like yellow stripes on the sides of the bulkheads. And when we went in, there was light, and it was coming from what appeared to be jars or opening in the floor, and there were multicolors, and there seemed to be a liquid, and it was moving. It was bubbling. Yeah, hard to believe.
What were the colors?
They were, I think one was yellow, and I'm thinking red and green, like something was still active on that ship. And Rutledge started going over there, and I warned him. I said, those could be dangerous. And he said, no, I don't think so. And he went over and took some of the colored liquid and put them in a container and brought them back.
Did you ever learn what was in it?
No, NASA never said one word to me about it.
Did you and Rutledge discuss whether or not this was a propulsion system?
Shall we play a game?
Meat has been found in the quarantine zone.
I wondered if maybe it was highly radioactive material, some type. I tended to think, and it was moving. It was bubbling. Yeah. It's like something was still active on that ship. And I thought it might be a cellular culture of some type. And I considered it to be probably highly dangerous. But Rutledge wasn't fazed. He just went over there and had some kind of a dipper and put it in a container. Got a little sample from each one.
You saw no other sign of any other bodies, and yet these yellow, green, and red, they were like pools of liquid, right, bubbling.
Yeah, kind of maybe a foot and a half in diameter, circular.
So they're small.
Yeah, they were small, and they gave off light. It was phosphorescent, luminescent. There was like a flange out of the floor to hold the liquid in, bubbling and foaming. It's utterly amazing that anything would still be active on that ship.
After 1.5 million years.
Yeah, especially if it was 1.5 million years, that's correct.
What did NASA speculate would be the reason that a huge cigar-shaped craft could have stayed on the moon for 1.5 million years with a deteriorating gray and this very preserved Polynesian-looking pilot with the tubes on her face, without the other grays, the other reptilians, the other Nordics, whatever is up there and has claimed territory, taking the craft or taking the bodies or doing something in the last 1.5 million years to this outer spaceship?
I don't know what NASA would think. I would guess that maybe they just never went into that compartment. The other compartments seemed cleaned out.
Did you astronauts pick up the Polynesian-looking preserved female with the tubes on her face and transfer her to the lander to take back to the Earth?
That's correct. We did that.
And that went which NASA facility?
I have no idea.
You landed in the ocean to the west of Vandenberg?
I believe it was in the Pacific.
But this million-year-old alien was in the capsule that came down in the ocean, and you and Rutledge were retrieved with her.
That's correct.
Been found in the quarantine zone.
That non-terrestrial officers would refer to human beings, officers who are off-world in some capacity, in a classified way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you found that, was that in the U.S. Space Command website, or was that in some other, was it in U.S. Space Command, or was it in some other department of the military or the Navy?
I think it's an Navy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A single Navy operative went into Germany. This is like 1939. There's very strange organizations and different research groups all over, not just Germany, but in the occupied countries too. And strangely enough, Germany was putting in production fantastic vehicles. They didn't have wings on these aircraft. They didn't have empennage or tails. A triangular shape. Some were rectangular shape.
Meat has been found in the quarantines.
And so he, being a spy for the Navy, found out all of these fantastic situations that were going on inside of Germany. And this is an important point. Instead of him going to his boss, coming back to the United States, he went directly to the Secretary of the Navy, Forrestal. Forrestal gets tapped on the shoulder. He gets told, don't select a Navy officer to head up these operatives. What? He's told to select somebody who had never been in Annapolis. Now, almost every Navy officer, whether they're one-star or lieutenant commander, they've all been through Annapolis to learn how to be a Navy officer. It turns out Forrestal is told that every book in the libraries, every book in the colleges, every book in the universities, every book on this planet is misinformation. It's misinformation, which is initiated by the Draco reptilians.